Hello and welcome to West Country Wanderings. Welcome to episode 5 of the Secrets of the Stroudwater. I'm here in Whitminster Churchyard, next to Whitminster Church. I'll insert a shot of that now. And a house behind me there is called Whitminster House. Many kings actually stayed in this house. Also been used as a film location many times. What's it all got to do with canals? Well, actually, the gentleman that lived here built the very first Stroudwater Canal right in front of the house. Amazing. I'll tell you all in the story here on Secrets of the Stroudwater. Just behind me here is a bridge which has actually been replaced within the last couple of years, and it goes over part of the River Froome. There's another section of the River Froome in front of me. But not only does it go over part of the River Froome, this is a surviving section of the Cambridge Canal. I guess you've probably never heard of it. I hadn't until I started doing the Secrets of the Stroudwater series, diving into the history books and much else besides, as will become clear later in today's video. But this here was once a canal. But it was an unusual canal, a very unusual canal. It was a private canal. It wasn't for carrying freight or coal or any of those sort of things that we've come across previously here on West Country Wanderings. It was purely and solely built for pleasure. So who was this mysterious man that had this canal built here, right in the heart of Gloucestershire, and why did he do it? Now, this section of water here, close to Whitminster Lock, requires a little bit of explanation. It isn't quite as it appears. Behind the camera here is an automated weir, and that weir was put in by the Gloucester and Sharpness Canal Company to provide water into their canal. Some of it was also siphoning off towards the city of Bristol via waterworks at Purton, but that's another story. That's not part of our story. So what is this stretch of water? Well, currently it's part of the Stroudwater, and it will be again. So behind the camera is Whitminster Lock, and coming in a diagonal direction will be a new section cut through to join up with this section here, Stroudwater going that way towards Whitminster roundabout and the A38. But it hasn't always been this way. When the Stroudwater Canal was built, it was built parallel to a straightened section of the River Froome. I'll insert an old map now so you can see what I'm talking about. I don't know why at that point the two weren't utilised and combined at that stage, but the case is they weren't. So you've got the canal, the Stroudwater Canal, which opened later in the 18th century, which is more twisty and windy than the straightened River Froome. But why was the River Froome so straight? Well, of course, you're probably already ahead of me, and that is simply because this was originally the Cambridge Canal, straightened to provide pleasure boats for the great and the good that lived and visited Whitminster House. So who was this mysterious person? Now, we need to go a little bit back in our time, in our story, to 1729, when an act was proposed, the Stroudwater Navigation Act. It didn't actually pass Parliament until 1730. After the act was passed, not a lot actually happened because of the objections of all the mill owners, including one here at Whitminster Mill. But what was actually going on then? Well, we need to go to London. On the 14th of February 1717, Richard Owen Cambridge was born. Now you're getting understanding why it's called Cambridge. Nothing to do with the city of Cambridge in the east of England, or even the smaller village of Cambridge here in Gloucestershire. He was born in London to a very wealthy landed gentry type of family. He attended St John's College in Oxford, but didn't actually complete his degree. He lived around Lincoln's Fields in London. And in 1741, several things happened combined at the same time. He got married and moved here to the house, Whitminster House, which we saw earlier in the video. In fact, his family had bought the house in 1721. It's always had connections to monarchy and the great and the good, lords and ladies and that sort of thing. The full detailed history, that's for a different video because it's quite complex. But so he moved here to Whitminster. He also had an interest in boats, always been fascinated with boats. And he also liked to hold parties and to have all his friends come to the parties. And in order to impress them, decided to completely landscape the grounds of Whitminster House in front of it. And because he'd bought, or his family had bought, a section of the River Froome, he thought, why don't I turn it into a pleasure lake? Or go on further. Let's connect it up to Sabrina and then take it further on. In fact, he actually built 3 miles of canal purely for pleasure craft here. So going from Famelode Pill on the River Severn right through to, well, almost by what is now the Froome Bridge Inn near Whitminster roundabout on the A38. Some of Mr. Cambridge's hard work in straightening the River Froome was later utilised by the proprietors and owners of the Chemmick Canal, which we come across in episode 1 here of the Secrets of the Stroudwater, and also sections of the Stroudwater itself, although it makes a slightly different route heading across towards Sabrina. I'll insert a map now so you can see the route that it took. I was hoping to go across there to film a bit of that section, the other side of the Gloucestershire Canal, which obviously wasn't there when Mr. Cambridge built his own pleasure canal, but it's very, very muddy, should I say, with all the rain that we've had in the fields there, low-lying fields. It's pretty boggy, so I didn't want to do that. So we've got another section here. I've just moved probably about just a quarter of a mile further to the east from Whitminster Loch now in the direction of the A38, and we're in this lovely wooded gladed section. And this is the sort of views that the people coming on the pleasure craft would have seen as they glided along the Cambridge Canal, staying at the wonderful Whitminster House. Now, besides being interested in boat and landscaping gardens with ornamental canals, Richard Owen Cambridge was also a poet. In fact, he was friends with both Alexander Pope and Frederick Louis, who was the Prince of Wales. And at some point in the mid-1940s, after his canal, the Cambridge Canal, can be completed here in Gloucestershire, he invited both of them, plus many other people as well, over to a giant party. And I found in a biography of Richard Owen Cambridge a wonderful transcription of exactly what happened on that event, and I'll read some of that to you now. First of all, to say that Frederick, the Prince of Wales, was the son of King George II. He was also the father of King George III, although he died quite early. In fact, he died just a few years after, I think 1751, after his visit to this wonderful party along this, what was then an ornamental canal. The Prince of Wales, accompanied by his Princess, the Duchess of Brunswick, made a visit to Lord Bathurst at Cirencester. That's a town about 15 miles to the east of here, still part of the Bathurst estate. They were accordingly received by him in his smaller boats here at Whitminster, at the head of his own private navigation, and after landing to view the house and grounds, continued their passage to the River Severn, where they were conducted into Venetian barge, on board of which, having taken their station in the most beautiful stretch of the river. That's wonderful. And also in the same book, as a footnote, goes on to describe one of the boats that are actually used on the Cambridge Canal here in Gloucestershire. The double boat consisted of 2 distinct boats, 50 feet in length and only 18 inches wide, placed parallel to end, the other at a distance of 12 feet. I don't have a photograph of that, but obviously photography hadn't been invented then in the 18th century, but there is an engraving. I think it's open to artistic interpretation, and it shows 2 men actually pulling a boat in front of Whitminster House and the church where we started our video along the Cambridge Canal. But it's wonderful to be able to find that engraving. In fact, it's in the book. The book itself is actually stored in the University of California, but the whole book is available free of charge to view, so that's why I was able to access. Obviously now it's long out of copyright, so I was able to include a couple of images from it, including one of the man himself, Richard Cambridge. The other thing worth mentioning about this, the Cambridge Canal, the very first Stroudwater Canal variant of the Stroudwater Canal, is that as far as I'm able to ascertain, it was the very first canal in the United Kingdom that was purely built for pleasure craft, not for business, not for public use, not for carrying freight, but solely for people to enjoy themselves. That's something that we associate with canals nowadays. Now the industry, by and large, has left canals on the UK canal network. We tend to use them. People do live on them, of course, in narrow boats, but they also take holidays on them, going up and down the canals. But that was a concept that Richard Cambridge started right here in Gloucestershire in the middle of the 18th century. Now, at some point in the late 18th century, Richard Owen Cambridge moved away from the family seat here at Whitminster House to Twickenham in South London. The reasons for that are not entirely clear, but I guess he probably wanted to be amongst the social circle of London because he had lots of literary friends, and they tended to be, for the main, based in and around the London area. So that's where the centre of poetry was. I'll put in the name of his most famous work, which was actually written in 1751, although in that biography it includes some of his work which was written here, some odes he wrote even to, or about, Sabrina and the River Severn, of course, a familiar trope here on the West Country Wanderings. But yeah, so he moved to Twickenham, although that was not his end of connections in terms of canal. Because he was away from the Whitminster House, sadly the gardens fell into a little bit more of a decline, a little bit of a disrepair, because he wasn't hands-on, not living nearby. But he was still interested in canals. In fact, I've said before that both the Stroudwater Canal, that is, the proper canal, not the River Frome, and the Thames and Severn Canal both have extensive records. There's a brilliant website where you can look at detailed minutes of the company of proprietors of the Stroudwater, and Richard Owen Cambridge, if you do a search, comes up many, many times. Initially, when the Stroudwater Canal was being built, his name comes up because they needed to purchase some of his land to build the canal through this part of Gloucestershire and connect it up to the River Severn, long time before Saw Junction and Gloucester Sharpness and all that, which came later in the earlier part of the 19th century. So his name came up that. But he was also very interested in particularly in some of the surveyors that they used, some of the lock engineers. Some came down from places like Droitwich, because they had expertise in the Droitwich canals and Stourport, that kind of area. And he was involved with that, according to the minutes as well. And I'll put a link to that in the description of today's video. Richard Owen Cambridge died in 1802 in Twickenham. In fact, there's a memorial and gravestone to him in Twickenham. Let's see if I can find a link to that and put that in as well. However, he was cared for by his son, who looked after him in his final months of his life. And his son returned here to Whitminster House, and he also had a keen interest in the affairs of the Stroudwater Canal, and his name comes up in the minutes as well. After Richard Owen Cambridge's son returned back here to Whitminster House, he also had a keen interest in the Stroudwater Canal and affairs of it, and his name comes up many, many times. But when he passed away towards the middle of the 19th century, the house was sold and it was bought by the Teasdale family, who still live here today, generations on. It's now used as a wedding venue. There's lots of cottages around the area which are rented out for holiday lets. It's also used as a filming location for many, many years. The Hammer House of Horror series, that was a mouthful, I knew I was going to struggle over that. Hammer House of Horror, Bray Studios in Berkshire, wasn't it? It was based, but they use this for filming their films many, many times of the episodes, particularly the ones that landed on the TV in the I think it was 1980, wasn't it? Also Sanditon, which a couple of years ago was filmed here as well, that costume channel, and many, many other films that I can't remember, but lots of them. I can see why, because it's a nice peaceful location. The house itself is sheltered away from private viewing, well, public viewing, the footpath. You can't actually see it, so it's really good for filming. The legacy, though, of Richard Owen Cambridge and his canal, the straightened sections, live on, although sadly the landscaping that he did in Whitminster House, the grounds no longer survive, although the house grounds are still beautiful. It wasn't his work that you see there today. It's strange, though, that he rarely gets a mention in the history books of the Stroudwater Canal, because he came before all the other ones, before Darraway, before Kemet, and all the other schemes that were tried and fell before the actual Stroudwater Canal was built. They often forget Mr. Richard Owen Cambridge, who came first, and as I say, as far as I'm aware, built the very first canal purely for leisure in the entirety of the United Kingdom. So this is to you, Richard. Thank you. That's it for today here on West Country Wanderings in one of my Secrets of the Stroudwater series. There'll be another one of those coming up not too distant future. There'll also be another one in my Secrets of the Thames and Severn Canal series coming up as well. Plus the other things that I do, my railway series, walking series, Cotswolds and on the coast in Devon, Cornwall and Dorset. Till next time, take care of yourselves, look after yourselves, and I hope to see you on the channel again. Bye bye for now.